I've seen so many people go for the cheap 1080p panels that promise big screen and end up watching movies that look like they're being projected onto a wall of fog. The disappointment kicks in the second you try to binge a series in a dim room and the colors just don't pop. That's the exact place where the Samsung QN48S90FAEXZA 48-inch 4K OLED Smart TV shows up as a possible smarter buy. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're standing in the electronics aisle, the biggest hesitation is whether a 48-inch OLED really justifies its price tag compared to a standard LED. The fear is twofold: you might be overpaying for a tech gimmick, or you could end up with a screen that looks great on paper but feels awkward in your everyday living room. I spent a week setting this model up in a medium-size apartment, swapping it in and out of a bookshelf mount, and using it for everything from gaming to late-night cooking videos. What I found was that the value isn't just in the headline OLED badge, it's in how the TV behaves when you actually press play. First off, the picture quality. The OLED panel gives you true blacks because each pixel can turn off completely. In practice, that means when you dim the lights for a thriller, the shadows stay deep and the bright parts stay vivid without the typical blooming you see on many LED sets. I tested it with a recent HDR Netflix series and the contrast felt almost cinematic, even at a modest viewing distance of 8 feet. The NQ4 AI Gen3 Processor does a decent job of upscaling lower resolution content, so even older Blu-ray discs looked sharper than they did on my old 1080p TV. The upscaling isn't magical, it won't turn a 720p YouTube clip into a masterpiece, but it's enough that you don't feel like you're watching something inferior. Sound is another area where this TV tries to punch above its weight. The built-in Dolby Atmos speakers provide a sense of height and directionality that makes a decent difference when you're watching an action film or listening to a soundtrack with spatial cues. I won't suggest you replace a dedicated soundbar for a full home theater experience, but for a compact living space the audio is surprisingly immersive. In a real-world scenario, I had the TV on a narrow console with the volume turned up for a family dinner, and the dialogue stayed clear even with the kitchen blender running in the background. Now let's talk about the day-to-day usability. Samsung's Tizen Smart Platform feels familiar if you've used any of their recent smart TVs. Apps launch quickly, and the remote's voice control works well enough for changing channels or searching for a title without needing to type. One hidden trade-off is the reliance on an internet connection for the cleans without dripping feature, which is Samsung's marketing term for the self-cleaning OLED algorithm. In practice, the algorithm runs a brief cycle every few weeks and you won't notice any flicker, but it does require the TV to stay connected to Wi-Fi. If you're in a spot with spotty internet, that feature might not work as intended, though it's not a deal-breaker. Who should buy this? If you're a cinephile who watches a lot of HDR content, games on a console that supports 4K at 60 frames per second, or you simply want a TV that looks great in a dim room, the QN48S90FAEXZA hits the sweet spot. The 48-inch size is ideal for apartments, secondary rooms, or even as a dedicated gaming monitor. The included 2-year Amber protection plan adds peace of mind against screen burn-in, a concern that often haunts OLED buyers. For anyone who lives in a bright, sun-filled living room and plans to keep the TV on a wall that gets a lot of glare, you might still find an LED better suited because even the best anti-reflective coating can't fully neutralize direct sunlight. Who should skip it? If you're primarily watching broadcast TV or lower-resolution streaming services, you may not notice the OLED advantage enough to justify the higher cost. Likewise, if you already own a high-end sound system, you might view the built-in speakers as redundant and could save a bit by opting for a less expensive LED with a larger screen size. Finally, if you're on a strict budget and can't stretch to the price point, the savings you get from a standard 4K LED of similar size often outweigh the incremental visual boost. Practical strengths: true black levels that make HDR content feel lifelike, an AI processor that handles upscaling without adding artifacts, and Dolby Atmos that fills a small room without extra equipment. The TV also integrates smoothly with Samsung's ecosystem, so if you already have a Galaxy phone or a SmartThings hub, casting and remote control become almost automatic. The Amber Protection Plan is a solid safety net, especially for those worried about the burn-in myth that still circulates online. Practical weaknesses: the need for a stable Wi-Fi connection for the self-cleaning routine, a remote that still feels a bit cramped for heavy gamers.